This is Grok Talk. We are talking to Ralph Benko. We have Kimberly Morin on the line. And, of course, Skip, Mike, and Rick are in studio.
Hello.
Hello. Did I turn you up? Yes, I did. All right. Kimberly, I didn't know you had all that money. You there?
You didn't know?
No. I figured you'd be buying equipment for Skip. All right.
So Ralph, you made some excellent points, especially about the change in Fed policy, which was more or less around the time that Greenspan was in fact in charge of things. Was he not in charge?
Actually, he did a great job for his first 2 terms, and then Bob Woodward wrote a book called Maestro, which says Alan Greenspan can do no wrong. It went right to his head, is the way I read the tea leaves, and he immediately started, going on a bender.
Yeah.
So in his last term.
Was he not in fact a libertarian, almost a Randian, Ayn Rand that is, and a gold standard proponent in his early years?
And in his late years, his latest book, The Map and the Territory 2.0, has a whole chapter on how great the gold standard actually worked. Now, Dr. Greenspan is pessimistic about the prospects for restoring the gold standard until we get the welfare state under control, but I think he's got it backwards, and not meaning to slur the good name of Social Security, which is not welfare, it's social insurance, and it's the kind of thing even Hayek would have loved. The fact is that if we can get economic growth, and we can, up to 3.5%, a number of the candidates are promising 4%, but their recipes are seriously wanted, how to get there. Or Scott Walker, who has 4.5%, or Mike Huckabee, who has 6%. It's all vaporware, okay, because none of them are seriously talking about tackling the Fed, and the Fed is the key element here. But the point is, if you guys help us nominate a candidate who will seriously tackle the monetary policy issue by getting the candidates to support the Brady-Cornyn Centennial Monetary Commission, it's really simple and it's not scary. And I'll talk more about the commission in a minute if I haven't already bored you into a state of complete stupefaction. Then both Social Security and Medicare become solvent as long as we keep that growth rate up. We don't have to raise the retirement age, and I'm approaching that, so I hope we don't. We don't have to cut benefits. We don't have to, above all, raise taxes. So
I got news for you.
the politically suicidal and morally dubious proposal by Chris Christie to, quote, reform entitlements. Watch out when anybody from Washington or who wants to be president uses the word reform. It should make your trigger fingers itchy, metaphorically speaking. It usually means that they're going to try to either raise your taxes or take away a benefit. At 3.5%, maybe even 3.3%, we don't have to touch Social Security. We don't have to touch Medicare, and it would be a tragedy for us to do that. They're high integrity programs. So the point here is that if we can get to 3.5%, we can get to 4%. We might even be able to get to 5% for a brief period because we've got a lot of slack to pick up. And the only known way to do that I've been able to discover is by putting the Fed, getting the Fed out of uncharted territory, putting it back on track. And the way to get the Fed back on track is to get the candidates to endorse the Brady-Cornyn Centennial Monetary Commission, which will do a high integrity, neutral empirical study of what the Fed has done and how it's worked out for 100 years. And instead of everybody just arguing with each other, I've got my position, you've got your position. Let's do something really novel in Washington. Let's look at reality. Let's look at the facts, and then draw our policy from what really works for the benefit of working people like me. And by the way, I'm probably the one member of the vast right-wing conspiracy, far right, serial number 0002. Reagan's serial number of the vast right-wing conspiracy was 0001, but we retired it when he retired. I had the privilege of working for him in the White House as a deputy general counsel. So I have the lowest operational serial number of the vast right-wing conspiracy. Nobody gets to the right of this, okay?
Especially on money.
Especially on money. And I'm a dues-paying member of the AFL-CIO.
That's a combination.
It's probably the only. I'm probably the only one. But the fact is, I am in total solidarity with working people. I'm a working guy myself. I am in total solidarity with working families who are the real victims of this. Because if you look at what economists call the Gini coefficient, that's Gini, not like the genie out of the bottle, or not like I Dream of Jeannie by Kimberly, then we are, median family income has flatlined since directly when Nixon closed the gold window. The American dream died on August 15th, 1971. Median families have flatlined in terms of their income, whereas the rich have gone up in a hockey stick fortune, because this really benefits this easy money policy really benefits the rich and really prejudices working people like me.
All right, let me throw in two real quick questions here, Ralph. First of all, what was different between the late 90s and the early 2000s, both of which were under Greenspan, because there was a bubble blown right then? And secondly, what's the difference between the damage the Fed did before and after the gold window was closed?
Well, as I said, in the first two, if you look at various indicators that are too tedious for me to actually talk about on the radio, it's quite clear that Greenspan sustained the policies of the great Paul Volcker in what was called the Great Moderation through the 90s. And then late in the 90s or early in the 21st century, he went off on this boom and bust cycle. He created the NASDAQ bubble and bust. He created the housing. He and Bernanke created the housing bubble and bust. And they really thought, I think, just reading the tea leaves, that housing prices could not go down because they'd never gone down. So if they pumped up that bubble, everybody would be house rich instead of house poor. I lost my house in the pop, by the way, so I take this very personally. So that seems to be the differential between the early Greenspan Fed and later Greenspan Fed. Does that answer your first question?
Sure. So I was just wondering where the easy money came in, but okay, that's that. And then what's the difference between before and after the gold window? Because the Fed did damage both sides of that event.
I'm trying to recontextualize your question here because as stated, it's not technically perfect. Okay.
No, we've had 102 years of the Fed, and they have done damage to the economy throughout that period with boom and bust and intervention.
Well, let me just point out one thing about that, and that is the dollar today is worth. When Nixon took us off the gold standard, he said that the dollar tomorrow will be worth as much as the dollar today. That is true. On August 16th, 1971, the dollar was worth what it was on August 15th. So Nixon once again managed to tell a technical truth and a moral lie. Because now, 43 years later, the dollar is only worth 15 cents of what it was worth in 1971. And over the long run of the Fed, which when it was managing the gold standard, it managed to bring the Great Depression on our head. Because it wasn't a real gold standard. It was a bizarre caricature of the gold standard called the gold exchange standard, which actually did cause the Great Depression. But the gold standard itself absolutely did not. When we were on a pure gold standard before the Fed in the late 19th century and early 20th century, we had the best period of America had the best period of economic growth in the history of the world. Our prosperity increased by almost sevenfold in that 40 years, compared to 1.5 times in the last 40 years. So the gold, even though Paul Krugman and Matt O'Brien and other neo-Keynesians say that the gold standard is horrible, in fact, the gold standard has outperformed in practice the Federal Reserve note standard by an enormous amount. And I'm not the only one who says so. The Bank of England did a study in 2011 called Financial Stability Report Number 13. How's that for an incendiary title? And your listeners can go look it up. Bank of England Financial Stability Report Number 13 and Financial Stability Paper Number 13. And they did a report card between the paper money Federal Reserve note standard, the Bretton Woods gold exchange standard, and the pure gold standard. And they flunked the Federal Reserve note standard in every category as performing worse. Less job creation, more inflation, more recessions, longer recessions, deeper recessions, more banking crises, more currency crises. I mean, just in practice, the Federal Reserve note standard has proved miserable. But the Fed has such prestige in Washington that everybody just kind of assumes that they're a wizard and that that they are really good at managing the monetary policy in a way that will create prosperity, even though all of the evidence is absolutely against that.
All right, Ralph, I got to break in because we got about 10 seconds to a hard break. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I hope we can get you back again.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And the latest book?
We don't have time, Mike. We got to go. Thank you very much, everybody. This is Grok Talk. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
Rock.